Todd Nilson with Clocktower Advisors. I am presenting today about how to market your business online with little or no budget. I originally gave this presentation as part of a local event for small business owners where I live, and it was well received, but some of the people weren't able to attend, so I decided I was going to record this anyways and put it up on the website. So if you find this useful, please let me know. I'm interested in feedback. But again, I wanted to create something that was at least a blueprint for somebody as a new business owner to start thinking about their digital, their online strategy in a little bit more directed, thoughtful way. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Well, digital marketing comprises quite a lot of different areas. Your website, social media, even your email marketing campaigns. But it can be divided into three separate categories that can help you make sense of what you're doing. This graphic from Titan may be all well and good to say that you need all three areas of digital marketing, but do you really? Well, not at first. If you're just getting started, it's probably way too soon to get worried about paid media right off the bat. And earned media is only something you get once you've started with your owned media. And when we talk about your own media, we're talking about your web properties. What is your website? If you have a mobile-friendly site, a blog, social media channels, or your email newsletters, any of these things count as your owned media. And you want to be able to, as a result of creating great and engaging content within your own media, to get that to result in mentions, shares, reposts, reviews, anything that represents how others are reacting to you or responding to you. And obviously, more active kinds of interactions with your brand are much more valuable than something as simple as a like or a share. You want people commenting and interacting and talking to you about your business. And so that's the idea of where to get started. Once you've got that whole very difficult piece of having your own media in place and being able to start generating some value from your earned media, then it's time to maybe think about experimenting with some of your paid media work. So let's focus in on the owned media side of things. If you're just getting started and you're looking for some ways to really just kind of get your feet wet a little bit, I'd invite you to think about three different steps. So begin with your goals. Next, create unique, interesting, highly relatable content. And then you've got to measure your results. In addition to these three steps, you need to think about how much time you have each week to create content and measure those kinds of results. If you're like most entrepreneurs, it's yet another thing on your long list of things to do. If you're fortunate enough to have a spouse or a friend or a partner who can jump in there and help you with your online marketing, that's great. But most of us don't have that time, especially if we're a solopreneur or entrepreneur that just kind of getting started in whatever your space happens to be. So you need to figure out what kind of time you're going to carve out for yourself. Ideally, maybe once a week, you're getting ready, sitting down and working on your content and reevaluating your goals and looking at what your metrics are looking like and adjusting as you go each week. But having that structured time for yourself and figuring out a way to move forward is really important to figure out. And some of the best thinking about productivity, what that generally means is you need at least an hour and a half of uninterrupted time to do any kind of deeper work. And then you need to think about how often you need to re-examine your goals. If you're in a really volatile space that changes a lot day to day, you may need to look at your approach as often as monthly in what you do. More often than not, you're going to want to at least take pause and stop and reevaluate your business goals once a quarter or at least once a year so that you are not just kind of doing the same thing again and again. And those decisions need to be based on what kind of results you're seeing from your efforts. So again, these are the three steps. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each one of these. It's not going to be a very long video, but just wanted to give people enough of a teaser to start thinking about what they may want to do and what's sort of the next logical steps to take. So as I said, you want to start with your goals. And any kind of strategy begins with a really honest assessment of what your resources are and what your environment is like. And I'll tell you what I mean about that. When I think about resources, I've got time, and I've got money, and then I may have some other assets having to do with my business or any kind of advantage that I might have. That might be my location, it might be my years of experience that can bring to bear. It might be the uniqueness of my product or service in the marketplace. It could be really anything as far as assets. Time and money are a little more easy to grasp. You only have a limited amount of time and you only have a limited amount of money. In fact, you may not have any money to put towards your digital marketing to start with, and that's just fine, and in fact, what the point of the video is about. And then by environment, what I mean is thinking about who you are competing against. Now, if you're in a retail space, you may think, oh, well, I'm competing with the shopping center down the road for my time and service. And that may very well be the case, and you may want to be tracking what they're doing online and how they're marketing themselves. And if they're another small business, what they're doing and are they outflanking you in some way with what you're doing. But you may also want to think about bigger competitors or even things that you may not initially think are competing with you at all. So retailers are all competing with Amazon and some of the big box stores that have strong online presences because they can compete strongly on price and availability and distribution. How do you compete against that if you're a small retailer getting started? Well, maybe it's based on the personalized service you give. Maybe it's based on being very responsive to inquiries by people who are in your immediate area or vicinity. If you're an online retailer, it's a much more direct relationship where you have to be there. Your responsiveness is your storefront, and that's where you're getting all of your sales from. And then you need to be thinking a little bit about why customers choose to do business with you. And that's both the emotional and practical benefits that they get. Practical benefits, I needed a ladder, I went to the store, I got the ladder, I can now climb up on my roof and clean out my gutters. That's a practical benefit. But in terms of the emotional benefits, how does it feel to be a successful customer for you? And you need to think about how that has an impact on the kinds of content you're creating, because the kinds of content that you create needs to resonate in such a way that they feel that it hits those like emotions that your very best customers feel. A sense of satisfaction, a sense of feeling the comfort that this retail place that you go to, and again, I'm using retail as an example. It could be anything. It could be a professional service, accounting, whatever your business happens to be. But the content that you create needs to be reflective of that emotion that you're trying to evoke, that your very best customers have and feel. So how do you get at this emotion? Well, you start asking your best customers, hey, tell me a little bit about what this meant to you. Listen to their stories. Listen to the words they use, the adjectives that they're used to describe their experience, how they feel afterwards. If they just say they're happy, dig a little deeper. See, what is it about it that makes them happy? What is the actual emotion that's a little bit below the surface of that? Because that's usually where you find the nugget of really good information that you can use to bring into your marketing content and your content strategy. And then finally, thinking about these goals, be thinking about the third piece of this, the third step that I talked about, which is how do you know that you've succeeded? If you've never written down what your goals are, and I mean literally write them down in a journal, a piece of paper, put them in your, in a Word document, in a Google document, but have it written down somewhere, your actual goals and what you're trying to do. And those may be things like driving a certain amount of sales. It might be building a large following in your market. Again, we'll talk a little bit about some of the specific calls to action with your content in just a moment. So that's your goals. So let's look forward to the next step, which is creating unique content. And when you're creating unique content, as I mentioned before, you need to be thinking about the emotions that you're trying to evoke and then the practical benefit of buying your service or product. But then you also need to know some other information, such as when are your target customers likely to be online? What time of day are they visiting your Facebook page? Or if you can look at your Google Analytics for your website, when are they showing up and looking at what's there? How often do you post content? You need to really be a little careful. It's not just about peppering your potential customers with all of the different products or services you offer. they, especially if it's something like a Facebook or Twitter, they've got a limited amount of patience with how many messages they're willing to see from you in a given day or time. And a lot of the research that's out there tends to be for Facebook, you've maybe got 2 posts a day, LinkedIn 1 post a day, Twitter, you've got a lot more leeway, maybe up to as many as 15. And again, thinking about the channels that you're using and the kinds of messages you're putting forward, and especially with email marketing, if you're trying to get them to pick up your product or service, you can really oversaturate your potential customers and really just get them to unsubscribe from your list if you put upon them too much and fill up their inbox with too many messages. So think a little bit about that. Think about where you're publishing. So as I mentioned, there's different platforms, and you may want to do different things in different platforms and at different times of day. And when your competitors post. What if your competitor posted a great offer right before your great offer? I mean, that would kind of be terrible, right? So you need to be thinking about what your competitors are doing, and really be mindful and watching them on a pretty regular basis, because you should pretty much assume that they're watching you and what you're doing. Another consideration around your content is whether you should write long or short form content, whether you should create videos or infographics, whether you should use stock images or pay for professional photography. My opinions about these are going to vary a little bit. Short content tends to work really well in mediums like Twitter and Facebook. Longer content is great for blogs. But generally speaking, you want to lean towards having at least some video components to your own content strategy and mix, and visual graphics, whether it's infographics or some kind of interesting graphic that can go along with whatever your text post is, or other kinds of images. If you can, do your best to avoid stock images. So many of them look really tired. They may be very professionally done pictures of people shaking hands or in a meeting or doing things, but they don't actually serve you. Most people just kind of look right past them. It's almost like advertisement. It's invisible to them now. So if you want to look fresh, it's better to look like you've got an unfinished bit of photography, something that you took on your iPhone or your Android phone, rather than using a stock image. It's just more real. It's better, and it looks like you're making an effort at what you're doing. Then finally, and this one is really important, you need to think a little bit about the purpose of your content. And what I mean by that is you need to think about what is the call to action. And so there's a couple for you to think about. Many of these are some common ones. You want somebody to maybe like your Facebook page or share the content that you just gave them with a friend. Maybe you want them to join a mailing list or download or use a coupon code, buy a product, schedule an appointment, sign up for an event. Whatever these things happen to be, you need to be thoughtful in how you're structuring that piece of content. If you're putting it up on Facebook and you want somebody to sign up for an event or join your mailing list, are you including a button within your Facebook page so that they can do this? And is it really clear what they're going to get when they click on that button? Or if you're providing a link within that Facebook post and you want them to come back to your website and read a blog entry and then download a white paper, you need to think about those interactions that are happening, like what's happening on the social media site. When they click on that link, where is it going to take them? When they get to that page, what are they going to see on the page? And how are you going to guide them towards that call to action that you want them to make? Again, you need to think a little bit about these calls to action, and then you need to find a way to track or measure these things on the other side. Because this is where a lot of organizations, both large and small, tend to stumble and fall. They get so concerned about the idea of, and I heard this phrase a lot, and it always sets my teeth on edge, feeding the beast. In other words, this monster that wants to see content on all the time. I've never believed in that. I've always thought it was much more important to have great organic content, stuff that you've built yourself, and that it's shared in the amount that you've got the time to share it. And as long as you're doing those things thoughtfully, you're going to get better results in terms of your search and your visibility online. So be thinking about those calls to action and how they work. I'll just give you a couple of ideas for some content creation tools. I didn't want this to turn into a tools discussion, but I get these questions all the time when people are thinking about like how they start creating things. Most of these tools are free or they have a great free trial, And they're really easy to use and get into when you get in there. It might seem a little intimidating, but you're best to just jump in. I guarantee you, everybody that tries these tools for the first time feels a little uneasy, a little anxious, but you start using them, you look at some tutorials, there's usually a lot of online help, maybe even somebody in a chat window who can help you, and they're willing to jump in and see that you get productive with the tool, because ultimately some of them want to sell a paid subscription for what they're doing. So some of these things like Adobe Spark's, free tool, great for creating video stories. If you're not a videographer, if you're not used to taking video, this is a nice way to kind of get things into place and start working. Remove.bg, great new tool. If you've got a picture of a person but you don't like the background that they're in, you can go to this website and upload the picture or put in its URL, and it'll actually strip out all the background really nicely, and you can drop it into whatever your advertisement is and use it. Remember, use royalty-free or use something that you did yourself if at all possible. Otherwise, you got to pay the royalty. JotForm, there's a lot of form creation tools out there. I like JotForm. I also like Wufoo. There's a number of them that are available. JotForm's free for up to 100 submissions, so 100 people could jump in and ask to download your white paper, and that might be great for you as a business startup, and especially if they want to pay for a product or something like that. That would more than enough pay for a subscription for your JotForm to go forward and use it for even bigger numbers of submissions. If you're not a writer, you could use something like Hemingway to help coach you on getting your copy a little bit more readable. Canva, again, another free use, or at least a good free trial for designing graphics. MailChimp, this is really a go-to tool. MailChimp and Constant Contact are great for easy and free email lists. HubSpot, if you need to track your customers and your prospects, it's a great free package to get in there and start using it. Of course, they've got paid versions of it, but HubSpot is a really nice entry-level tool for tracking your database of people, getting out of a spreadsheet and actually having a true database where you're entering names, level of contact. You can see a sales pipeline and see all kinds of metrics around it. And then in terms of saving time for yourself, you can use some tools like Buffer, TweetDeck, and Hootsuite. These aren't my favorite tools in particular because I think a lot of people just use them to post out on all their platforms, basically the same kind of content. I have just some issues with it being the same thing on every platform. I think your content should be suited to whatever kind of social media channel you're using. But some people really like them. I'm not against them, but it just isn't for me personally. And then finally, if you're not a web designer and you don't really feel like you can afford a couple of $1,000s for a decent WordPress site from an independent developer, there are some really low-cost alternatives that are out there for you to build your own website. And literally, you can put together a nice site in a couple of hours with some of the tools that are there and do most of what you think you might need to do. So some of these are Squarespace or Wix that are available. There are others that are out there. But also, depending on where you've bought the domain name for your business, so like for Clocktower Advisors, I go through GoDaddy.com. They've got a great website builder platform that's there, so that if you're not a developer yourself, you can create something that really looks great and put it out in a very short amount of time. So again, looking at something like one-on-one hosting or GoDaddy or really any of them that are out there, they have a website builder tool for you. If you have other tools that you use, go ahead and leave some comments down in the area below the video here. I'd love to hear what you guys use and have found useful. Then finally, the last step is measuring the results of what you've done. And you've probably heard the old adage that what doesn't get measured, never improves, never changes. The kinds of things that you're probably going to be looking for in terms of measurement are going to be things like comments and shares. These things are much more important than likes. Likes, that's an easy click. It's low-grade engagement. You want people that are doing more quality kinds of things. They want to share something with a friend, or they're actually writing something in response to what you've done. That means you're thinking about the content you've created, and again, it's evocative and gets them in some sort of emotional way, or they feel that they need to respond to you. You are probably, if you have a website, you're looking for click-throughs to your website. You're looking for how long people are staying on your website and the number of new visitors versus return visitors to your site. You're looking for the medium or source reports. It's in your acquisition reports in Google Analytics. And again, Google Analytics, another great free tool that I should have listed on the last slide. It's a must-have for you if you have a website. So the medium source reports from your acquisition reports in Google Analytics will tell you where people were before they came to your site. Really useful to kind of know, what people are thinking about or sort of what process they go through to arrive at where you are. And then the other one that tends to confuse people a little bit is bounce rates. You want a low bounce rate on your website. A high bounce rate means somebody came to your site and they left immediately. They didn't interact with the page. They didn't do anything on the page. They didn't click a button. They just left. And that's, of course, of no value to you. And now a certain amount of people will find your site, and they will do that on a regular basis. But really, a good rule of thumb, and this is from Avinash Kaushik, who, by the way, has a great blog, Occam's Razor. I highly recommend it, for thinking about, your analytics and measurements that you want to have. But anything above 35% is really kind of a warning sign that your content's not engaging enough, or you're not getting people to interact. And then finally, another great thing about Google Analytics is you can set up goals. So what I mean by this, for example, let's say you have a newsletter and you want people to subscribe to the newsletter. So you have them fill in their first name, last name, email address, click the submit button, and it usually, the way that these are set up, it takes you to a thank you page. That thank you page should be a goal for your organization. You should put a number on it, a certain number of goals that you want to hit in a given month, and Google Analytics will track that and will flag it and can even email you when you've hit that goal. So again, really useful to have in place and to start thinking about the value that you're getting out of your online marketing efforts. So a quick bonus round of some other items. I get these questions a lot, so I'm just kind of going to do a rapid fire here and not go very deep, but just a couple of thoughts for you. How much should I budget for online advertisements and where? I would think about it like for most local entrepreneurs, you probably want to look at Facebook as your primary tool for putting out boosted ads and getting a little wider audience for what you do. I wouldn't budget very much for this, probably no more than $100, $150 a month. If you're getting started, you're probably on a very tight budget anyways. You can always experiment with it a little bit later. If I was branching out a little beyond that, I might do some things with Google Ads. If I had a B2B business, I might consider LinkedIn or Twitter, but your mileage is going to vary based on these. Again, experiment, see what seems to be working, discard the stuff that doesn't, be a little ruthless about that. What is SEO? What do I need to know about it? SEO stands for search engine optimization, and I'm not going to go very deep in this, but the idea is you want to figure out how you can get on the first page of search engine results based on what people are typing into Google or Bing or whatever, DuckDuckGo, whatever kind of search engine that they are using to find you. So getting known for certain phrases and making sure that copy is in your website and in all of your marketing and branding materials and in things that you put in your social media will help you to be found more easily by these things. There's a lot more deep information about that. Maybe I'll do a separate video about it for you if you're just getting started. But there's other much smarter people than me talking about SEO out online, and I'd encourage you to go take a look around for those guys too. Are TV, radio, and newspaper dead media? No, they're absolutely not. There's still a lot of value in using these, especially if you're a local entrepreneur, getting that visibility. To these, I might also add outdoor display ads. Thank you to Roger Rousseau from Two Rivers Main Street here, the local guy who came from a lot of this background, and he recommended that as another way to get a good bang for your buck if you want to get visibility in a local market. Do some billboard ads, something like that. But which social media platform is really best? Well, I'm not going to tell you that. This depends on where most of the people in your market are that you're trying to reach. You need to think about your audience and who it is that is tending to buy from you. So that's a really important question for you to ponder yourself. How many social media channels do I need to be on? Again, trick question. You need to be on as many as you think you have time to do justice to them. How do I get a lot of followers? Does it matter? It only matters if those followers are viable business prospects for you in some way, or they're bringing you some kind of value. If you're a B2B company and you have 5 followers on Twitter and all 5 of those followers are customers of yours, then 5 is a great number of followers for you. You might want more, obviously, you want to grow. But again, if you've got that direct line of communication with the people that are your direct customers, great. You want to be out there with prospects and getting in front of them too. It does make general sense to try to keep growing the number of people that hear about you. When should I post content and how often? I talked a little earlier about how often you might be able to get away with content on different platforms. When should you post content? It's going to vary a bit. Sometimes the platform that you're using will make recommendations to you. Sometimes if you use a tool like Buffer or Hootsuite, it can actually post on your behalf at times when they see peak traffic. But generally speaking, for something like Facebook, some of the research that I've seen has said, posting between 1 and 3 o'clock makes it more likely that people like or share your content. You may find it's very different for your customer base. And so, again, it's got to be a data-based decision, looking at what's working for you and what's not working for you and making decisions accordingly. Do I need to actually write a marketing strategy down? Yes, you should, even if it's just a one-pager. In fact, I think a one-pager is often more valuable than a longer strategy. Long documents are daunting, they take too long to do, and then they sit on a shelf once you've created them. If you've got a one-pager, you can post it up in your office and look at it every day and look at how you're doing it at getting at your goals. How do I get mentioned on other websites? This is a tactic known as getting backlinks, and it's a great idea if you can get them, if you can get news coverage from television, radio stations that usually have a web component and Facebook pages. If you get mentioned there, you may get linked back to. If you have local bloggers or other influential people within your marketplace that mention your work, that's great. One of the great ways that you can get mentioned on other websites is to blog for some of those other websites and find some ways to get involved. What's my brand? That's a huge question, but just at a very high level, it's not your logo. It's what people think and say about you, how they feel about you, and the things that you do. And then finally, how long until I see results? You're going to need to make some decisions, but I would say that if you're following a strategy and you're finding that after 6 to 8 months that you're not getting the results that you want to see, it's time to change your tactics and try something new and experiment. Great thing about web-based marketing and digital strategy is that you've got the ability to keep adjusting your tactics and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. So again, if it's going too long, it's probably time to change it up. Anyways, thank you guys for your attention. I hope that there were some useful things in here. If you have other questions or things that occur to you, please ask me some questions down in the Q&A section in the comments area, and I'll do my best to point you to resources and things that I found useful. Again, I'm not the smartest guy in the room with some of these things, but I hope that I've given you a start and some ideas for moving forward. And that's it for me.